Hey everyone, this is an article by Adam Buick titled Non-Market Socialism. I first became critical of capitalism while still at school towards the end of the 1950s. At first I thought that the alternative was what existed in Russia. After all, they called themselves, quote, socialists, end quote, the opposite of capitalism. But then I read Milovan Djilas's book, The New Class, which came out in 1957 and showed that Yugoslavia, Russia, and so on were not the classless societies they claimed to be. See box 7.1. You see this box real quick, because there's boxes in all these essays, and they kind of, don't quite fit. But so I'm going to read it now. Milovan Djilas, ex-president of Yugoslavia, on communist workers and plans. Compulsory labor in the this is a quote from Milovan Djilas. Quote: compulsory labor in the communist system is the result of monopoly of ownership over all or almost all national property. The worker finds himself in the position of having not to sell his labor. He must sell it under conditions which are beyond his control, since he is unable to seek another better employer. There is only one employer, the state. The worker has no choice but to accept the employer's terms. The worst and most harmful element in early capitalism from the worker's standpoint, the labor market, has been replaced by the monopoly over labor of the ownership of the new class. This has not made the worker any freer. When the USSR became the first country to embark upon national planning, the USSR's leaders, who were Marxists, connected this planning with Marxism. The truth is this. Although Marx's teachings were the idealistic basis of the revolution in Russia, Marx's teaching also became the cover for later measures taken by the Soviet leaders. Although leaning heavily on Marx in the beginning, communist planning has a more profound idealistic and material background. How can an economy be administered other than as a planned economy when it has or is going to have a single owner? End quote. Milovan Djilas, The New Class, An Analysis of the Communist System. Back to the main body of the text. At the same time, I read left-wing Labour Party politician Aniron Bevan's book, In Place of Fear, which had come out earlier in 1952, and which convinced me that not only did socialism have to be democratic, but also could only be established by democratic electoral parliamentary means. Wikipedia says, In Place of Fear is a book written by Aniron Bevan, founder of the National Health Service. The book was influential among the labor left and the labor movement as a whole, but was overshadowed by Anthony Crosland's The Future of Socialism, although Crosland referred to In Place of Fear as, quote, the most widely read socialist book, end quote, of the period. Serving as a semi-autobiographical text, Bevan brings to great attention his life growing up in the mining towns of South Wales, quote, a young miner in a South Wales colliery. I can never say that word right. That's how unproletarian I am. My concern was with one practical question. Where does power lie in this particular state of Great Britain, and how can it be attained by the workers, end quote. Aniron Bevan, In Place of Fear. Considered highly quotable, and is a central source of the beliefs of the pre-Ben labor left. New section, Bevan. Bevan, throughout the book, is a strong advocate for democratic socialism, the final chapter showing the ideology's name. Bevan states his belief that democratic socialism has the only principles, quote, broadly applicable to the situation in which mankind now finds itself, end quote. By extension of this, he advocates for greater levels of freedom of speech and expression, opposing concentration of newspaper ownership, end quote. legacy. Although mostly remembered as an extension of Bevan's fight for the health service in place of fear, is also considered to be a statement of what British socialism should be. So I just wanted to get to see there's footnotes. And the footnotes are just referencing the books. After reading these two books, I was convinced that countries such as Russia were not socialist, and that socialism could only be democratic, as the Labour Party and the Trotskyists, who were then, quote, boring from within, end quote, it never had any attraction for me. I looked around for an organization that was left of Labour but not the Communist Party. In Britain, I approached 5 parties: the Independent Labour Party, the Socialist Party of Great Britain, the Socialist Labour Party of Great Britain, a UK affiliate of the Socialist Labour Party of America, the Fellowship Party, a pacifist party, and the Fife Socialist League, a breakaway from the Communist Party in Scotland. The 2 parties that particularly interested me were the Socialist Party of Great Britain and the Socialist Labour Party, because basically they advocated only socialism as they understood it, and unlike the others, nothing else. According to Wikipedia, the Socialist Labour Party, SLP, is a socialist political party in the United Kingdom. The party was established in 1996. Okay, this isn't the same party. Not that party. I'll look at the Socialist Labour Party of the United States just to look at what the politics are about. So for the Socialist Labour Party USA, the Socialist Labour Party is a political party in the United States. The Socialist Labour Party was established in 1876 and was the first socialist party formed in the country. Originally known as the Working Men's Party of the United States, the Socialist Labour Party changed its name in 1877 to Socialistic Labour Party, and again sometime in the late 1880s to Socialist Labour Party. The Socialist Labour Party was additionally known in some states as the Industrial Party or Industrial Government Party. In 1890, the Socialist Labour Party came under the influence of Daniel De Leon, who used Daniel De Leon's role as editor of the weekly People, the Socialist Labour Party's English-language official organ, to expand the party's popularity beyond its then largely German-speaking membership. Despite his accomplishments, De Leon was a polarizing figure among the Socialist Labour Party membership. In 1899, De Leon's opponents left the SLP and merged with the Social Democratic Party of America to form the Socialist Party of America. After his death in 1914, De Leon was followed as National Secretary by Arnold Peterson, critical of both the Soviet Union and the reformist wing of the Socialist Party of America. The Socialist Labour Party became increasingly isolated from the majority of the American left. The Socialist Labour Party's support increased in the 1950s and into the 1960s when Erich Haas was influential in the party, but slightly declined in the mid-1960s. The Socialist Labour Party experienced another increase in support in the late 1960s and early 1970s, but then subsequently declined at a fast rate, with the party last nominating a candidate for president in 1976. In 2008, the party closed its national office and the party's newspaper, The People, ceased publication in 2011. The party advocates, quote, socialist industrial unionism, end quote, the belief in a fundamental transformation of society through the combined political and industrial action of the working class organized in industrial unions. So that's the Socialist Labor Party in the United Kingdom, in the United States. Socialist Party of Great Britain. The SPGB is a socialist political party in the United Kingdom, founded in 1904 as a split from the Social Democratic Federation. The Socialist Party of Great Britain advocates using the ballot box for revolutionary purposes and opposes both Leninism and Reformism. The Socialist Party of Great Britain holds that countries which claim to have established socialism had only established, quote, state capitalism, end quote, and was one of the first to describe the Soviet Union as state capitalist. The party's political position has been described as a form of impossibilism, and its ideology is impossibilism, orthodox Marxism, socialism, and it's affiliated with the World Socialist Movement. Yeah. Back to the text. It so happened, though I did not fully realize at the time, that both of them argued that socialism involved the abolition of money, although the Socialist Labor Party wanted to replace money with, quote, labor time vouchers, end quote, discussed later in this chapter. The Socialist Party of Great Britain is a, quote, companion party, end quote, of the World Socialist Movement. The World Socialist Movement is an international organization of socialist parties created in 1904 with the founding of the Socialist Party of Great Britain. The member parties share a common classical Marxist worldview and adherence to socialism defined as a distinct economic system from capitalism. As a result, the parties of the World Socialist Movement are held in sharp contrast to social democratic political parties and Marxist-Leninist movements. In contrast to social democratic parties, the World Socialist Movement parties do not pursue social and economic reforms to capitalism, nor do they seek political office in electoral politics, and they do not focus on so-called progressive causes, believing such actions to be irrelevant to their fundamental goal of socialism. In contrast to Marxist-Leninist communist parties, they do not subscribe to the theories of imperialism, vanguardism, and democratic centralism, believing such practices to be antithetical to the realization of socialism. The World Socialist Movement defines socialism as a moneyless society based on common ownership of the means of production, production for use in social relations based on cooperative democratic associations, as opposed to bureaucratic hierarchies. Additionally, the World Socialist Movement includes statelessness, classlessness, and the abolition of wage labor as characteristics of a socialist society, characteristics that are usually reserved to describe a communist society, but that both Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels use to describe interchangeable with the words socialism and communism. Just for my own purposes, I want to see what the World Socialist Party of the United States. The World Socialist Party of the United States is a socialist political organization that was established in Detroit, Michigan, as the Socialist Party of the United States in 1916, which operated as the Socialist Educational Society in the 1920s before being renamed the Workers' Socialist Party. The organization reemerged in the 1990s and exists today as the American Companion Party of the World Socialist Movement. And its ideology is anti-Leninism, classical Marxism, impossibilism, revolutionary socialism, socialism. Okay, back to the text. And there's a box on the World Socialist Movement. I'm going to read that real quick. Box 7.2 on the World Socialist Movement. Quote, the World Socialist Movement claims that socialism will and must be a wageless, moneyless, worldwide society of common, not state ownership and democratic control of the means of wealth production and distribution. Claims that socialism will be a sharp break with capitalism with no, quote, transition period, end quote, or gradual implementation of socialism, although socialism will be a dynamic, changing society once it is established. Claims that there can be no state in a socialist society. Claims that only the vast majority acting consciously in its own interest for itself, by itself, can create socialism. Opposes any vanguardist approach, minority-led movements and leadership as inherently undemocratic, among other negative things. Promotes a peaceful democratic revolution achieved through force of numbers and understanding. Neither promotes nor opposes reforms to capitalism. Claims that there is one working class worldwide. Lays out the fundamentals of what a socialist society must be, but does not presume to tell the future socialist society how to go about its business, ... This is from a piece titled, How the World Socialist Movement is Different from Other Groups, accessed at the World Socialist Movement site on the 1st of March 2010. Back to the text. New section, a moneyless society. Any party that advocates only, quote, socialism, end quote, inevitably must have a lot to say about what socialism would or could be like. As I read through the past and current literature of the Socialist Party of Great Britain, I realized that right from its formation in 1904, it insisted that socialism had to involve the abolition of money. I was introduced to and read the two classics of A Moneyless Society, Thomas More's Utopia and William Morris's News from Nowhere. Utopia, Wikipedia says, Utopia, with the subtitle, a truly golden little book, not less beneficial than enjoyable, about how things should be in a state and about the new island Utopia, is a work of fiction and socio-political satire by Thomas More, who lived from 1478 to 1535, written in Latin and published in 1516. The book is a frame narrative primarily depicting a fictional island society and its religious, social, and political customs. Many aspects of More's description of Utopia are reminiscent of life in monasteries. And News from Nowhere, written in 1890, is a classic work combining utopian socialism and soft science fiction, written by the artist, designer, and socialist pioneer William Morris. It was first published in serial form in the Commonweal Journal, beginning on the 11th of January, 1890. In the novel, the narrator, William Guest, falls asleep after returning from a meeting of the Socialist League and awakes to find himself in a future society based on common ownership and democratic control of the means of production. In this society, there is no private property, no big cities, no authority, no monetary system, no marriage or divorce, no courts, no prisons, and no class systems. This agrarian society functions simply because the people find pleasure in nature, and therefore they find pleasure in their work. The novel explores a number of aspects of this society, including its organization and the relationships which it engenders between people. Morris fuses Marxism and the Romance tradition when Morris presents himself as an enchanted figure in a time and place different from Victorian England. As Morris, the Romance character, quests for love and fellowship, and through them for a reborn self, he encounters Romance archetypes in Marxist guises. Old Hammond is both the communist educator who teaches Morris the New World and the wise old man of Romance. Dick and Clara are good comrades and the married lovers who aid Morris in his wanderings. The journey on the Thames is both a voyage through society transformed by revolution and a quest for happiness. The goal of the quest, met and found though only transiently, is Ellen, the symbol of the reborn age and the bride the alien cannot win. Ellen herself is a multidimensional figure, a working-class woman emancipated under socialism. She is also a benign nature spirit as well as the soul in the form of a woman. The book offers Morris's answers to a number of frequent objections to socialism and underlines his belief that socialism will entail not only the abolition of private property, but also the division between art, life, and work. In the novel, Morris tackles one of the most common criticisms of socialism, the supposed lack of incentive to work in communist society. Morris's response is that all work should be creative and pleasurable. This differs from the majority of socialist thinkers who tend to assume that while work is a necessary evil, a well-planned equal society can reduce the amount of work needed to be done by each worker. News from Nowhere was written as a libertarian response to an earlier book called Looking Backward, a book that epitomized a kind of state socialism that Morris abhorred. It was also meant to directly influence various currents of thought at the time regarding the tactics to bring about socialism. Back to the text. There's a box that's referenced here. This is a conversation from William Morris's utopian novel, News from Nowhere. And it starts with this is all dialogue. It is clear from all that we hear and read that in the last age of civilization, men had gotten to a vicious circle in the matter of producing wares. They had reached a wonderful facility of production, and, they had gradually created or allowed to grow, rather, a most elaborate system of buying and selling, which has been called the world market, and that world market, once set a-going, forced them to go on making more and more of these wares, whether they needed them or not. So that while, of course, they could not free themselves from the toil of making real necessaries, they created a never-ending series sham or artificial necessaries, which became, under the iron rule of aforesaid world market, of equal importance to them with the real necessaries which supported life. By all this, they burden themselves with a prodigious mass of work merely for the sake of keeping their wretched system going. Yes, and then, I said, why then, since they had forced themselves to stagger along under this horrible burden of unnecessary production, it became impossible for them to look upon labor and its results from any other point of view than one, to wit, the ceaseless endeavor to expend the least possible amount of labor on any article made, and yet at the same time make as many articles as possible. To this, quote, cheapening of production, end quote, as it was called, everything was sacrificed. The happiness of the workman at his work, nay, his most elementary comfort and bare health, his food, his clothes, his dwelling, his leisure, his amusement, his education, his life, in short, did not weigh a grain of sand in the balance against the dire necessity of, quote, cheap production, end quote, of things, a great part of which were not worth producing at all. Nay, we are told, and we must believe it, so overwhelming is the evidence, though many of our people scarcely can believe it, that even rich and powerful men, the masters of the poor devils aforesaid, submitted to live amidst sights and sounds and smells, which is the very nature of man to abhor and flee from, in order that their riches might bolster up this supreme folly. The whole community, in fact, was cast into the jaws of this ravening monster, the quote, cheap production forced upon it by the world market. And that's from William Morris, News from Nowhere. In the end, I was convinced that the alternative to capitalism had to be a moneyless society. Further reading led me to the understanding that this was the position of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, despite the claims of the Russian government and its supporters. Looking back, I think that what attracted me to the idea of a moneyless society was disgust at the methods used by sellers to obtain money. I always used to say, and still would, that an evening watching the advertisements on commercial television, introduced into Britain in 1955, should be enough to put anyone off capitalism, with its tricks, half-truths, and patent lies devised to try to sell you things. In college, I studied, among other things, economics, and could see that I was being taught an intellectual defense of buying and selling. Economics was defined as the study of the allocation of scarce resources amongst competing needs, with money as the best way to do this. In fact, because needs were assumed to be infinite, scarcity and money were seen as natural phenomena that could never be abolished. I did not agree, but that was what I was taught, and that, as far as I know, economic students still learn. One second. I want to copy that down, so it's going to take me a little second. But I think we'll all be able to live. Take this moment to let your brain chill out. The fallacy put forward by the writers of these textbooks was to beg the question. By defining scarcity in relation to infinite needs, they made it impossible to overcome. But this is not a normal definition of, quote, scarcity and its opposite, quote, abundance, which are more normally defined in relation to some actual needs, which are never infinite. But once it is conceded that needs are not infinite, as they are manifestly not, then the whole intellectual structure of economics collapses. Whether or not scarcity and money can be abolished becomes a question not of definition but of fact. Could or could not enough of the things actually needed be produced? On the basis of statistics produced by such organizations as the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization and the World Health Organization, and with the elimination of the waste that capitalism involves, not just in arms but in the whole money system, I was convinced that it could be. Therefore, a moneyless society was possible. New section, Wild Capitalism. In the 1980s, there was a change in the intellectual atmosphere as reflected with the coming into office of Ronald Reagan in the United States and Margaret Thatcher in Great Britain. Keynesianism and the idea of government intervention to help people went out and were replaced by the harsh doctrine of unregulated wild capitalism. The old ideas of Ludwig von Mises that a moneyless socialist society was impossible were resuscitated. In his article, Calculation in the Socialist in 1929, not 1929, in 1920, in Mises's article, Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth, Mises had argued that while a moneyless society might be able to decide that it wanted what it wanted to produce, it would not be able to work out the most efficient way to do this. Only a system with market-determined prices could. Footnote. Wikipedia says, not footnote. Wikipedia says, Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth is an article by Austrian school economist Ludwig von Mises. Its critique against economic calculation in a centrally planned economy triggered the decades-long economic calculation debate. The article was first published in 1920 in German under the title Die Wirtschaftsrechnung im sozialistischen Gemeinwesen, and based on a lecture Mises gave in 1919 as a response to a book by Otto Neurath, arguing for the feasibility of central planning. 2 years later, the essay was incorporated into Mises's book, Socialism and Economic and Sociological Analysis. The synopsis of the piece is that Mises laid out that economic calculation requires two fundamental things: a medium of exchange, i.e. money, and two, markets. According to Mises, although it is possible to perform economic calculation in a proficient manner without these two requirements present, very few circumstances exist. These circumstances include economic calculation within a household. To him, cost-benefit analysis is not hard to do in a personal scale. It is not hard to pick between a certain amount of wine and a certain amount of oil. However, because marginal utility is not homogeneous and universal, people will have different preferences. For example, a teetotaler may prefer oil to wine, whereas an alcoholic may prefer wine. Thus, the central planner or bureaucrat will have trouble distributing resources, as prices cannot be set without markets, as prices reflect the supply and demand of goods, labor, and resources. Buying and selling consumer goods within a socialist state will simply be internal transfers of goods and not, quote, objects of exchange, end quote, which sets the price mechanism out of order. Mises thought that the economic calculation is only possible outside of extremely limited circumstances by information provided by market prices, which reflects the changes of individual subjective values. Bureaucratic, centrally planned methods of resource allocation are inherently irrational and do not allocate resources in the most efficient method, which means that economic calculation in a socialist commonwealth is impossible. Because of the economist's idea that cost-benefit analysis is imperative and crucial, the socialist economy is also impossible. Back to the text. In 1920, in his article Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth, Mises had argued that while a moneyless society might be able to decide what it wanted to produce, it would not be able to work out the most efficient way to do this, and a system with market-determined prices could. If attempted, a moneyless society would sooner or later collapse into economic chaos. This became known as the, quote, economic calculation, end quote, argument against socialism. Mises had been criticizing the ideas circulating at the time and earlier inside the German and Austrian social democratic parties about how to organize production and distribution of wealth in a non-capitalist society, in particular the view put forward by Otto Neurath, later a noted philosopher, that money would not be needed as calculations could be done directly in kind. See detailed discussion of these debates in Chapter 4 of this book. I don't know who wrote that chapter. It might have been the John O'Neill essay that I have on the channel. However, the latter-day followers of Mises had a problem. There was no longer anybody around defending these ideas, since the Social Democratic and Labor parties had long since abandoned any idea of abolishing the market, arguing merely for government intervention to regulate it. The only people prepared to take Mises head-on were the Socialist Party of Great Britain. In the 1980s and early 1990s, I spent some time arguing in the columns of Free Life, the Journal of the Libertarian Alliance, and Libertarian Student, its student publication, that the production and distribution of wealth could be sustainably organized without money. Footnote. See, for instance, Adam Buick. Why the Market is Not Inevitable. The Journal of the Libertarian Alliance. End footnote. I have to admit, though, that the latter-day followers of Mises forced us to think more about how this could be done and to sharpen our arguments. They accused us of standing for a centralized command economy that implied that all decisions about the production and distribution of wealth would be taken by some central planning office. This is, I suppose, theoretically possible if it required a very powerful computer, but in the end we came to the conclusion that it would not be necessary. New section. Production for use. The alternative was a self-regulating system of moneyless production for use, which would be responding to real demand, that is, to what people decided they wanted for their individual consumption, as opposed to only, quote, effective, end quote, demand, that is, what people were prepared to buy with money. If a system worked for effective/paying demand, as Mises and other defenders of the capitalist market system claimed, why would it not work for real demand? Much of the work on this alternative system of self-regulating production for use was done by Peter Lawrence, who drafted the 1994 Socialist Party of Great Britain pamphlet, Socialism as Practical Alternative. One second. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to look at this Peter Lawrence person. Here's a little obituary for Peter Lawrence. It's from 2007, and it was originally from the Socialist Standard. I don't know who wrote it, but it was transcribed by Darren O'Neill. We regret to report the death at the end of March of Comrade Peter Lawrence of South London Branch. Peter Lawrence was born in Western Australia in 1932, where his parents had emigrated to try to make a living as farmers. His mother was Dutch, hence the spelling of his name. But the great slump of the 1930s forced them to return to England. In 1951, Peter Lawrence joined the Socialist Party, of which his elder brother Charles was already a member. A conscientious objector to national service, after a short spell in Wormwood Scrubs, he agreed to go into the medical corps. Then, disliking being a wage slave to an employer, he worked on his own, first as a tree surgeon, then as an antiques dealer. He was for many years an active member of the school parents' association in his local village. In the party, he was a writer, outdoor speaker, indoor lecturer, and a memorable contributor to party conferences. Peter Lawrence served on the executive committee on a number of occasions, most recently in 2006, as well as on the editorial committee of the Socialist Standard and the World Socialist, and also the Party Education Committee. Arising out of the latter, he was instrumental in the setting up of an ad hoc committee about production for use, to examine the evidence for how, once the barriers of minority class ownership and production for profit had been removed, the world could produce enough to supply all its inhabitants with adequate food, housing, clean running water, medical services, education, and other amenities. The committee also looked into ways in which socialist society could organize the production and distribution of goods and services without money, involving a self-regulating system of stock control. One result of this was the party pamphlet, Socialism as a Practical Alternative, the first edition of which was published in 1987, which Peter drafted. The practicality of socialism as a solution to the problems created by capitalism remained Peter Lawrence's primary concern thereafter. This is reflected in the publication last year of a political novel, The Last Conflict, reviewed in the December 2006 Socialist Standard, and of an online book, Practical Socialism, Its Principles and Methods. He also actively promoted the view that socialists needed to reflect on our attitude towards the need for some coercion and restraint in a socialist society, particularly its early days. Though not all aspects of his views on this found majority support within the party, especially regarding whether law and legal institutions would continue into socialism. Our sincere condolences go to his partner, Comrade Phyllis Hart, and to their son and grandchildren. Back to the text. Another great contributor to elaborating this alternative was Robin Cox. Footnote, Robin Cox, the quote, footnote, Robin Cox, quote, the quote, economic calculation, end quote, controversy, unraveling of a myth, end quote. So give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm looking at see if there's anything for Robin Cox. Not really seeing anything for him in particular, just things he's kind of like affiliated with. John Crump and I outlined such a system in 1986 in the final chapter of our book, State Capitalism, the Wages System Under New Management. And there's a long quote here. Quote, and I highly recommend this, and I recommend there's excerpts from this book on this channel which I think are phenomenal. I think the book, that like maybe not the whole book, is like well, I would say the whole book is excellent. What I'm saying is that like there's a book of articles by John Crump and Adam Buick that is like kind of like a condensed version of this called What is Capitalism or something like that, put out by Crime Thought Inc., which is like some kind of publishing house in Canada that put out a bunch of cool shit. It has this, it put out a book format of Alf Haben's What Was the USSR? And there's this little pamphlet here that I actually have right on my desk that says Scottanapolis, Democratic Centralism in Practice and Idea, a Critical Reevaluation. So they, but that book, which is excerpts from State Capitalism, the Wages System Under New Management, this is the first chapter, which is titled, like, What is Capitalism, is fucking tremendous. I couldn't recommend it enough. Anyway, quote, since the needs of consumers are always needs for a specific product at a specific time in a specific locality, we will assume that socialist society would leave the initial assessment of likely needs to a delegate body under the control of the local community. Although, once again, other arrangements are possible if that were what the members of the socialist society wanted. In a stable society such as socialism, needs would change relatively slowly. Hence, it is reasonable to surmise that an efficient system of stock control, recording what individuals actually chose to take under conditions of free access from local distribution centers over a given period, would enable the local distribution committee, for want of name, to estimate what the need for food, drink, clothes, and household goods would be over a similar future period. Some needs would be able to be met locally. Local transport, restaurants, builders, repairs, and some food are examples of, as well as services such as street lighting, libraries, and refuse collection. The local distribution committee would then communicate needs that could not be met locally to the body or bodies charged with coordinating supplies to local communities. Once such an integrated structure of circuits of production and distribution had been established at local, regional, and world levels, the flow of wealth to the final consumer could take place on the basis of each unit in the structure having free access to what is needed to fulfill its role. The individual would have free access to the goods on the shelves of the local distribution centers. The local distribution centers' free access to the goods they required to always adequately stocked with what people needed. Their suppliers' free access to the goods they required from the factories which supplied them. Industries and factories are free access to the materials, equipment, and energy they needed to produce their products, and so on. Production and distribution in socialism would thus be a question of organizing a coordinated and more or less self-regulating system of linkages between users and suppliers, enabling resources and materials to flow smoothly from one productive unit to another, and ultimately to the final user, in response to information flowing in the opposite direction, originating from final users. The productive system would thus be set in motion from the consumer end as individuals and communities took steps to satisfy their self-defined needs. Socialist production is self-regulating production for use. To ensure the smooth functioning of the system, a central statistical office would be needed to provide estimates of what would have to be produced to meet people's likely individual and collective needs. These could be calculated in the light of consumer wants as indicated by returns from local distribution committees and of technical data, productive capacity, production methods, productivity, etc., incorporating input-output tables. For at any given level of technology, reflected in the input-output tables, a given mix of final goods consumer wants requires for its production a given mix of intermediate goods and raw materials. Is this latter mix that the Central Statistical Office would be calculating in broad terms? Such calculations would also indicate whether or not productive capacity would need to be expanded and in what branches. The center, or rather centers for each world region, would thus be essentially an information clearinghouse, processing information communicated to it about production and distribution, and passing on the results to industries for them to draw up their production plans so as to be in a position to meet the requests for their products coming from other industries and from local communities. End quote. This is still my position. New section. Marx. The first article that Karl Marx wrote after becoming a socialist in 1843 was a criticism of a book on the Jewish question, which was published in the Deutsch Französische Jahrbuch in Paris in 1844. On the Jewish question is important because it showed a clear understanding that the establishment of socialism involves the disappearance of both the state and money, a view Marx held for the rest of his life, but which has largely been forgotten by the great majority of those who call themselves Marxists, who in fact stand for a state capitalism in which money would continue to exist. Footnote. This section draws on Adam Buick's essay, Marx, Money Must Go, published in Socialist Standard, September 1985. Sorry about that. I had to duplicate the PDF in order to be able to jump to the footnote. The first part of Marx's article on the Jewish question supports the granting of full political rights to religious Jews as non-Christians within existing society, but argues that political democracy is not enough, as political democracy does not amount to, quote, human emancipation, unquote, which can only be achieved, quote, when man has recognized and organized his, quote, forces propre, bracket, own powers, end bracket, as social forces, and consequently no longer separates social power from himself in the shape of political power, end quote. Marx on the Jewish question. The second shorter part applies the same sort of reasoning to money. Quote, emancipation from ... money, end quote, Marx wrote, quote, would be the self-emancipation of our time, end quote. Marx on the Jewish question. It is basically an attack on money and a call for the establishment of a moneyless society as the way to achieve, quote, human emancipation, end quote. It has not been given the same circulation as some of Marx's other writings of the same period. In a sense, this is a pity because some of Marx's strongest denunciations of money and money's effects on relations between people are to be found in it. Quote, practical need, egoism, is the principle of civil society, and as such appears in a pure form as soon as civil society is fully given birth to the political state. The god of practical need and self-interest is money. Money is the jealous god of Israel. In fact, in face of which no other god may exist. Money degrades all the gods of man and turns them into commodities. Money is the universal and self-established value of all things. It is therefore robbed the whole world, both the world of men and nature, of its specific value. Money is the estranged essence of man's work and man's existence, and this alien essence dominates him, and he worships it. Selling is the practical aspect of alienation. Just as man, as long as he is in the grip of religion, is able to objectify his essential nature only by turning it into something alien, something fantastic. So under the domination of egoistic need, he can be active practically, and produce objects in practice, only by putting his products and his activity under the domination of an alien being and bestowing the significance of an alien entity, money, on them. One moment, I want to copy that down. One moment, sorry, I want to copy this quote down. In some notes made in 1844 after reading James Mill's Elements of Political Economy, which marked the beginning of what was to become a lifelong study and critique of political economy, Marx argued that in private property society, people produce with a view to exchanging their products for money, so that what they produce becomes a matter of indifference to those individuals, as long as they can sell it, which means that money will dominate their lives. Quote, within the presupposition of the division of labor, the product, the material of private property, acquires for the individual more and more the significance of an equivalent, and as he no longer exchanges only his surplus, and the object of his production can be simply a matter of indifference to him, so too he no longer exchanges his product for something directly needed by him. The equivalent comes into existence as an equivalent in money, which is now the immediate result of labor to gain a living, and the medium of exchange. The complete domination of the estranged thing over man has become evident in money. The complete domination of the estranged thing over man has become evident in money, which is completely indifferent both to the nature of the material, i.e. to the specific nature of the private property, and to the personality of the property owner. What was the domination of person over person is now the general domination of the thing over the person, of the product over the producer, just as the concept of the equivalent, the value, already implied the alienation of private property, so money is the sensuous, even objective existence of this alienation. In these same notes on Mill, Those last quotes are from comments on James Mill, Elements d'économie politique in Marx and Engels' Collected Works, Volume 3. In these same notes on Mill, Marx explained in more detail how human beings came to be dominated by the products of their own labor, while at the same time giving us a glimpse of how things would be different in a moneyless society. Quote, "The essence of money is not, in the first place, that property is alienated in it, but that the mediating activity or movement, the human social act by which man's products mutually complement one another, is estranged from man and becomes the attribute of money, a material thing outside man. Owing to this alien mediator, instead of man himself being the mediator for man, man regards his will, his activity, and his relation to other men as a power independent of him and them. His slavery therefore reaches its peak." End quote. One second. End quote again. This is still fairly philosophical, but the meaning is clear enough. In a, quote, truly human, end quote, society, to speak like Marx at this time, human beings would produce things to satisfy their needs, and their products would, quote, mutually complement one another, end quote. This movement of products from the producer to those who needed them would not take place via money, but would be directly organized under conscious human control. In addition, the value of a product would be the value humans put on it in terms of usefulness or capacity to give pleasure. With private property and production for money, on the other hand, this cannot happen. Not only does the movement of products from producer to consumer come to be, quote, mediated, end quote, by money, but the value of a product comes to be judged not in human terms, but in terms of a sum of money. Finally, the whole process of the production and distribution of wealth escapes from human control and is dominated by an alien force, money. Real quick, I want to go to the Wikipedia for James Mill. James Mill, born James Milne, lived from 1773 to 1836, was a Scottish historian, economist, political theorist, and philosopher. James Mill is counted among the founders of the Ricardian School of Economics. James Mill also wrote The History of British India, published in 1817, and was one of the prominent historians to take a colonial approach. He was the first writer to divide Indian history into three parts: Hindu, Muslim, and British, a classification which has proved surpassingly influential in the field of Indian historical studies. Mill was the father of John Stuart Mill, a noted philosopher of liberalism and utilitarianism, and a colonial administrator of the East India Company. Back to the text. In his now well-known economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844, and what can be regarded as a prophetic vision of the sort of commercial advertiser's world we have to suffer today, Marx expanded on the point about the pursuit of money becoming the main aim of life in private property society. Quote, "The need for money is therefore the true need produced by the economic system, and the need for money is the only need which the economic system produces. The quantity of money becomes to an ever greater degree the economic system's sole effective quality. Just as it reduces everything to its abstract form, so it reduces itself in the course of its own movement to quantitative being. Excess and intemperance come to be its true norm." End quote. Marx. That's from the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844. Nobody reading such passionate denunciations of money can be led to any doubt that Marx stood for a moneyless society. Wages were a direct consequence of estranged labor, and estranged labor was the direct cause of private property. Marx never abandoned his view that money should be abolished through the establishment of a society based on common ownership and production directly for human need. New section, Bordiga. In 1975, a pamphlet called Un monde sans argent, le communisme, or A World Without Money, Communism, was published in France. The authors argued for the immediate establishment of a moneyless communist society. Libcom says, Un monde sans argent, le communisme, was originally published in 3 parts as 3 separate pamphlets in France between 1975 and 1976. It was produced by Dominique Blanc shortly after the dissolution of the Organisation des Jeunes Travailleurs Révolutionnaires. The name 4 millions de jeunes travailleurs was apparently, quote, adopted from a 1971 PSU youth publication, Parti Socialiste Unifié, a French socialist party, presumably to satisfy French publishing laws. Texts continued to be published under this name through the 1970s, including the widely distributed tract Bas le prolétariat, vive le communisme. It would have been nice to have an introduction that was not just loaded with French. Anyway, in 1975, a pamphlet called Un monde sans argent, le communisme, A World Without Money, Communism, was published in France. The authors argued for the immediate establishment of a moneyless communist society. Quote, "Communism does not overthrow capital in order to restore commodities to their original state. Commodity exchange is a link and a progress, but it is a link between antagonistic parts. It will disappear without there being a return to barter, that form of primitive exchange. Mankind will no longer be divided into opposed groups or into enterprises. It will organize itself to plan and use its common heritage and to share out duties and enjoyments. The logic of sharing will replace the logic of exchange." End quote. The pamphlet was published by a group called the Friends of the 4 Million Young Workers, which is Les Amis des 4 Millions. I don't know how to say 4 in French. Jeunes travailleurs, who were influenced by Situationists and above all the later writings of Amadeo Bordiga, who lived from 1889 to 1970. Sorry, I'm sick, and I also think there might be some allergy action going on as well. Footnote, this section draws on Adam Buick's essay Bordigism in Maximilien Rubel and John Crump's edited volume, Non-Market Socialism in the 19th and 20th Centuries. Bordiga had been, before the First World War, an active and prominent member of the, quote, intransigent, end quote, wing of the Socialist Party of Italy. Intransigence opposed reformist trends within the Socialist Party. Bordiga pointed out that, for Marx and Engels, socialist society involved the disappearance of money, buying and selling, wages, the market, and all other exchange categories. Marx distinguished 3 stages after the capture of political power by the working class: a transition stage, a lower stage of communism, and a higher stage of communism, the last 2 of which were both to be non-commercial and non-monetary. For Bordiga, both stages of socialist and communist society, sometimes distinguished as, quote, socialism and, quote, communism, were characterized by the absence of money, the market, and so on, the difference being that in the first stage, labor time vouchers would be used to allocate goods to people, while in full socialism this could be abandoned in favor of full free access. Bordiga was adamant that socialism did not mean handing over control of the use, and thus effective ownership, of individual factories and other places of work, either to the people working in them, or to the people living in the area where those factories or places of work were situated. Quote, the land will not go to peasant associations, nor the class of peasants, but to the whole of society, end quote. Bordiga. Schemes for, quote, workers' control, end quote, were not socialist demands. Socialism, Bordiga always insisted, meant the end of all sectional control over separate parts. Social classes and the political state would eventually, in the course of a more or less long transition period, give way to, quote, the rational administration of human activities, end quote, nonetheless, quote, a stateless economy, end quote. Bordiga took the view that that administrative posts were best filled by those most capable of doing the job, not by the most popular. Similarly, what was the best solution to a particular problem was something to be determined scientifically by experts in the field, and not a matter of majority opinion to be settled by vote. Bordiga was a vigorous critic of all forms of so-called, quote, market socialism, end quote. Whether this took the form of the states replacing private capitalists but retaining the enterprise form, as in Russia, or of various schemes for, quote, workers' control, unquote, of enterprises, quote, a system of commercial exchange between free and autonomous enterprises, ... is even a step backward compared with numerous sectors already organized on a general scale in the bourgeois epoch, as required by technology and the complexity of social life. Socialism, or communism, means that the whole of society is a single association of producers and consumers, end quote. Bordiga. Instead, Bordiga saw production in socialist society as being organized through a plan established by the central administration and drawn up and executed exclusively in physical quantities of useful things, without having recourse to any general equivalent, neither money nor labor time. Bordiga expected that in socialism, the level of production would eventually become relatively stable, which would make planning routine. Production would probably even decrease as compared with capitalism. Only goods that could be consumed more or less rapidly would be made available, obviously without charge, for individual consumption. All other goods would remain social, to be used in accordance with the arrangements society would make for their use. In socialism, houses would not be owned, but simply occupied by those who lived in them. Bordiga preferred to speak of consumption being social in socialism rather than individual. Although individuals would be free to choose which particular goods to take, not even in full socialism would individuals be able to consume whatever they might feel they wanted to. They would only be able to consume whatever society had decided should be available for individual consumption. The description of future society given here evidently earns Bordiga a place amongst those advocating a non-market society to replace capitalism, but in view of the quote, non-democratic end quote, character of the administrative structure which he envisages future society as having, the question of the extent to which it can be regarded as socialist must be seriously faced. Bordiga does not seem to have realized the extent to which restricting decision-making to a minority within society, even to an elite of well-meaning social and scientific experts, conflicted with his definition of socialism as the abolition of private property. Sorry, I gotta copy this down. So twiddle your thumbs, consume this dead air peacefully. While oh shit, bitch. Ah! Come on, back to the thing. God damn it. The technocratic aspects of Bordiga's description of communism, end quote, were ignored by most of those influenced by him. Thanks in part to the writings of Bordiga, the realization that socialism is neither state ownership nor workers' control of enterprises engaged in profit and loss accounting, whether in money or labor time, has been encouraged, particularly in France, Italy, and Spain. Back to the text. Where LETS fails. If you listen to the enthusiasts that recreate communities, cure unemployment, and even provide an alternative to the global capitalist economy, what can LETS, or local exchange and trading systems, can? According to Wikipedia, a local exchange trading system, also local employment and trading system, or local energy transfer system, abbreviated LETS, is locally initiated, democratically organized, not-for-profit community enterprise that provides a community information services and records transactions of members exchanging goods and services by using locally created currency. LETS allow people to negotiate the value of their own hours or services and to keep wealth in the locality where it is created. Similar trading systems around the world are also known as community exchange systems, mutual credit trading systems, clearing circles, trade exchanges, or time banks. These all use, quote, metric currencies, end quote, currencies that measure, as opposed to the fiat currencies used in conventional value exchange. These are all type of alternative or complementary currency. In the 21st century, the internet-based networks have been used to link individual LETS systems into national or global networks. Back to the text. Footnote. This section draws on Adam Buick, Where LETS Schemes Fail, published in Socialist Standard 1994. This is what the enthusiasts said when they became end footnote. This is what the enthusiasts said when LETS, local exchange and trading systems, first became popular. First, from Haverford West in Wales, Harry Weyers, quote, I'm really enthusiastic about LETS, local exchange and trading systems. Local exchange trading system. Local exchange trading systems. I think it's the most exciting mechanism for social change I've ever come across. In local exchange trading systems, debts don't accrue interest and there is no pressure to pay. A local exchange trading system check can't bounce, nor a local exchange trading system business go bust. Local exchange trading systems see money as a symbol, but unlike sterling, it can't be maneuvered to the detriment of the people using it, end quote. Harry Weyers. Footnote. Harry Weyers cited in G. Morgan, Bartering, an Alternative Economy or Just Returning the Compliment, published in Women and Home, October 1993. End quote, end footnote, end quote. Then from Southwark in London, Donna Chad McCarthy, quote, is a system to recreate a community economy which we were losing because of multinational companies and big supermarkets. Money which comes into Southwark is used once, then leaves via the banks which use that money to finance projects elsewhere, end quote. Donna Chad McCarthy. It says that Donna Chad McCarthy is an environmental auditor for small and medium-sized businesses and organizations and a green lifestyle coach. Donna Chad McCarthy appears frequently on radio and TV, having appeared on both the BBC's, quote, It's Not Easy Being Green program and ITV's How Green Is Your House? Back to the text. Footnote, Donna Chad McCarthy cited in W. Bennett, payment in kind is replacing the pound. And Ed May of the New Economics Foundation, quote, with mass unemployment in Britain, many people have the time but not the cash. Local exchange trading systems gives these people access to things they would not otherwise have, end quote. Footnote, Ed May cited in John Vidal, quote, take a few pigs along to the Pie in the Sky Cafe and watch payment go bobbin along. Published in The Guardian, the 12th of March, 1994, page 12. It's not Ed May, it's actually Ed Mayo. It looks like. It says that Wikipedia says that the New Economics Foundation is a British think tank that promotes, quote, social, economic, and environmental justice, end quote. New Economics Foundation, founded in 1986 by leaders of the Other Economic Summit, TOOES, with the aim of working for a, quote, new model of wealth creation based on equality, diversity, and economic stability, end quote. The foundation, the New Economics Foundation, has 50 staff in London and is active at a range of different levels. The New Economics Foundation's programs include work on well-being. The New Economics Foundation's own kind of measurement and evaluation, sustainable local regeneration, the New Economics Foundation's own forms of finance and business models, sustainable public services, and the economics of climate change. Back to the text. Finally, commentator John Vidal. Quote, the implications, say the theorists, are enormous. In a cash-starved economy, 1 in 5 British households is severely in debt. Despite the existence of wealth in the form of skills and resources, traditional exchange is hijacked by a lack of cash. With local currencies, as long as people make their goods and skills available, their exchange can go round and round. Quote, the community therefore becomes richer, end quote, says Paul Ekins, a green economist, end quote. End quote, John Vidal. The Guardian says John Vidal is The Guardian's environment editor, reporting for The Guardian for almost 3 decades until retiring in 2017. He died in October 2023. Back to the text. It is, of course, absurd that people who need things should go without, even though the skills and resources to provide for them exist. I can go along with the local exchange trading systems. Let me make sure I'm saying that right. I can go along with the local exchange trading system enthusiasts and denouncing the scandal of unmet needs alongside unused resources. The difference is that, while both of us criticize money, local exchange trading systems enthusiasts answer, quote, yes to the question, quote, so you want to go back to barter, end quote. While I would answer, quote, no, end quote. They want to retain exchange and trading with some kind of money. I want a society based on common ownership of geared to producing things directly for people to take and use, in which exchange and trading and money as the means of exchange would be redundant. Box 7.4 outlines the ways that labor vouchers function and the world socialist movement's position on labor vouchers. So I'm going to read that box really quick. The world socialist movement on, quote, labor vouchers, end quote. And again, these boxes are quotes. Quote, what are labor vouchers? Labor vouchers, or labor checks, labor certificates, labor time vouchers, are a device suggested to govern demand for goods in, quote, socialism, end quote. Much as money does today under capitalism. Those who support labor vouchers have several different approaches or definitions of them. We tried here to clarify what labor vouchers are, ... We use the words, quote, paid, quote, earned, quote, purchase, and similar words to mean actions in, quote, labor voucher socialism, end quote, that would be similar to what those words mean today. Most labor voucher supporters agree that 1. Labor vouchers are paid for hours of labor performed. 2. Labor vouchers are not money. 3. Labor vouchers are used to purchase goods and services. But they disagree with each other on the following points. 1. How are labor vouchers apportioned? Each worker gets the same quantity for each hour worked. If the agreed upon rate is 100 labor vouchers for 1 hour, everyone who works for 1 hour gets 100 labor vouchers. B. The number of labor vouchers paid per hour depends upon the difficulty or desirability of the work performed. 2. Temptation or permanent. 2. Temporary or permanent, question mark. A. Labor vouchers are a temporary measure. The general feeling here seems to be that people are used to money now and need time to wean themselves from it. It seems like what it would be in crass terms, what Marx suggests as a possibility in the critique of the Gotha program. B. Labor vouchers will be permanent. These advocates say that society needs some method to restrict access to goods, and or that without them there is no way to determine what items should be produced in what quantity when there are conflicting desires for goods. 3. What about those who do not or cannot work? A. Basic necessities should be free to all. B. Enough labor vouchers should be given out to those who do not work or don't work enough to ensure that they can afford basic necessities and perhaps more. C. Enough labor vouchers should be given out to those determined by someone or some group to be needy or justifiably unable to work to ensure that they can afford basic necessities and perhaps more. 4. What about non-traditional work or work not paid today? Housework, art, etc. A. Pay for housework, art, etc. on an hourly basis like any other work, possibly including difficulty factors, etc. B. Pay for art based upon desirability. How many people go to see it or some such measure. C. Straight exchange. Art is purchased with labor vouchers for whatever the buyer and seller agree upon. 5. Can labor vouchers circulate? A. No. Once a purchase is made, the labor vouchers are either destroyed or must be re-earned through labor. B. Yes. It appears that there are few who believe that labor vouchers should circulate like money, but there are those who believe that they can be, quote, invested, end quote. Although not for profit, proponents assure, or that when something is purchased, the seller could use them for their own purchases. Why the world socialist movement opposes labor vouchers, ... Labor vouchers would tend to maintain the idea that our human worth is determined by how much or how many goods we can own or produce. Labor vouchers require administration. Labor vouchers imply that someone must police who takes the goods produced by society, a waste of human labor in socialism. Source. So, end quote. Source. Labor vouchers at the World Socialist Movement website, accessed 1st of March 2010 at worldsocialism.org. New section. Return to barter. Local exchange trading systems are essentially local barter clubs. A group of people with varying skills get together and agree to exchange services that they can provide with any other member without using money. Records, however, have to be kept. Each member has an account, and when one member's services are used, their account is credited with the exchange value of that service, while that of the user is debited by the same amount. What normally happens is that each member is given a sort of checkbook, which they can use to pay for other members' services, either at a published price or as agreed between the two. Clearly, for all this, a unit of account is needed. Some schemes define this unit in terms of labor time. Others tie it to the pound. The accounts could in fact be done in pounds, but generally the unit is given a special name. In Britain, in Bath, it is a, quote, Oliver. In Brixton, it is a, quote, brick. In Reading, it is a, quote, ready, and so on. Local exchange trading systems really allow people, as is claimed, to bypass money and so have, quote, access to things they would not otherwise have, end quote. Two unemployed people with different skills can always barter their services. Thus, an unemployed plumber can repair an unemployed electrician's central heating in exchange for some rewiring by the electrician. A local exchange trading system is merely an extension of this. The plumber or electrician joins a barter club and gains access to a wider range of potential clients, as well as access to a wider range of reciprocal services. Too often, though, services include things like aromatherapy, holistic massage, tarot reading, and other such New Age fads not normally needed by the unemployed. So it's an alternative to placing cards in newsagents' windows or relying on the grapevine to learn about work opportunities. As such, like the black economy, it's a way of surviving in the capitalist jungle, but that's all. But do not local exchange trading systems help create a, quote, local community spirit, end quote? Maybe, but no more than any other local club. New section. Small is small. The trouble is that the idea has been hijacked by all sorts of currency cranks and funny money theorists who see it as the basis for an, quote, alternative money, end quote, and a, quote, alternative economy, end quote. They overlook two important facts. First, the activities covered by local exchange trading systems, such as repairs and personal services, can all be carried out by a single individual, and in the normal money economy could be done by self-employed people working on their own. In fact, from an economic point of view, local exchange trading system club members are acting as self-employed, as local exchange trading system is a club in which self-employed individuals barter their service. It can never extend beyond this to productive activities that require expensive equipment and plant and a large workforce, such as precisely the manufacture of the things that local exchange trading systems members and the self-employed repair. Second, there are definite limits to the size of a local exchange trading system, limits to the size a local exchange trading system can attain. The biggest in Britain has only 300 members. If it got much bigger than this, the administrative work of recording all the transactions would grow and could no longer be done by voluntary or part-time labor. People would have to be employed to do it, which would add to the running costs of the scheme and have to be shouldered by the members. The membership fees and transaction charges already levied by the scheme would rise. At a certain point, this would cancel the advantages of being in the scheme, and members would find it more convenient to re-enter the money economy and resort to newsagents' windows and contacts. New section, funny money. What most of the currency cranks who have latched onto the local exchange trading system idea envisage is converting the units of account the schemes use, such as Oliver's, bricks, and readies, into a real money that would circulate. In fact, most commentators, such as the journalist John Vidal, refer to the local exchange trading system units of account as, quote, currencies, end quote. But this is misleading. One second, gotta open up my footnotes page again. Sorry, no footnote, just a citation that I've already said. They are not money. They do not circulate. They only exist on paper or computer disk as a record of transactions. In fact, local exchange trading systems are more cumbersome than using money. After all, with a real money that circulates, an individual account of a person's exchange transactions does not have to be kept. Some of the advantages claimed by the local exchange trading system's units also apply to cash. So when Harry Wares says, in the quote above, quote, a local exchange trading system check can't bounce, end quote, this is true, but neither can cash. Similarly, when it is argued that people have an incentive to use local exchange trading system credits, and that when they do accumulate local exchange trading system credits, this does not give them any power to manipulate other people, as they do not pay interest. The same applies to cash. A large local exchange trading system credit balance is no more useful than a hoard of cash. What is being advocated as the ideal is a money that cannot be accumulated and cannot be lent at interest, with local exchange trading system units being seen as the formula to achieve this. But such a, quote, alternative money, end quote, is never going to come into being because it would be worse than existing money. If you have an exchange economy, which local exchange trading system enthusiasts accept as in the full name, local exchange trading system, then conventional money is the best means of exchange. Not only does it allow many more exchanges to take place than barter or a modified form of barter, like local exchange trading systems, but also the payment and receipt of interest facilitates more exchange. Banks are not, as some local exchange trading system theorists, along with the traditional currency cranks, suggest, villains who interrupt the normal circulation of money and goods by not making money available to match needs and resources unless they are paid a tribute in the form of interest. Banks are financial intermediaries who borrow money from people who do not want to spend that money immediately and lend that money to those who have something to spend money on but no money of their own. Naturally, banks take precautions to ensure that they are going to get back any money they lend, but the overall result is that they help keep money circulating and exchange going. To want to keep exchange but to do away with banks and taking of interest is unrealistic in the extreme. The way to end the scandal of unmet needs alongside unused skills and resources is not to retain the exchange economy while trying to get rid of some of the exchange economy's effects by reforming the money system. It is to get rid of the exchange economy altogether by establishing a society based on the common ownership of productive resources, where goods and services would be produced directly for people to take and use and not be exchanged or bought and sold at all. New section, the economy.
Your mother told me to ask you if you wanted to go.
No, I don't want to go.
Okay, I didn't think so.
Okay.
Pain in the neck.
The environment. I'm recording, so that's gonna be a funny. It's gonna be a funny thing. I love when I'm reading something and just something funny happens. It's just like, yeah, that's funny. Well, no, tell her I know if she's still here.
She said she was gonna wait for a minute and then leave. If she's still there, I'll tell her.
Oh, okay. That was my father. Pain in the neck. That's funny. The environment. A monetary economy gives rise to the illusion that the, quote, cost, end quote, of producing something is merely financial. Indeed, the word, quote, cost, end quote, is so associated with financial and monetary circulation that we are obliged to put it in inverted commas when we want to talk about it in a non-monetary sense. But the real cost of the pencil I'm using to write is not 50 pence, but the amount of wood, graphite, labor, energy, and wear and tear of machines used in producing it. This will continue under socialism. Goods will not grow on trees, but will still require expenditure of effort and materials to produce goods. The point is that under socialism, this expenditure of effort and materials will be estimated and calculated exclusively in kind, directly in terms of wood, graphite, and machinery, wear and tear, electricity, and so on, including work time. Socialism is concerned with conserving resources and will select productive methods that, other things being equal, use fewer materials and less energy. However, this will be only one factor taken into account in deciding which technical method of production to adopt. The argument between monetary circulation and calculation in kind is not merely a technical argument about how to calculate what units to use for this, but is an argument about the real meaning of words like, quote, value and, quote, worth. In socialism, it is not the case that the choice of productive method will become a technical choice that can be left to engineers, but this choice, too, will be made in terms of the real advantages and disadvantages of alternative methods, and in terms of, on the one hand, the utility of some good or some project in a particular circumstance at a particular time, on the other hand, of the real, quote, cost in the same circumstances and at the same time of the required materials, energy, and productive effort. To advocate monetary circulation is to advocate taking only one consideration into account when producing goods and making decisions about which productive methods to employ. This is patently absurd, but it is what is imposed by capitalism. Naturally, it leads to all sorts of aberrations from the view of human interests, in particular ruling out a rational long-term attitude towards conserving resources, and it imposes on the actual producers intolerable conditions, such as speed-ups, pain, stress, boredom, long hours, night work, shift work, and accidents. Socialism, because it will calculate directly in kind, will be able to take into account these other more important factors than production time. Naturally, this will lead to adopting different, often quite different productive methods than under capitalism. Certain methods will be ruled out altogether. The fast-moving production lines associated with the manufacture of cars would be stopped forever, except perhaps in a museum of the horrors of capitalism. Night work would be reduced to the strict minimum. Particularly dangerous or unhealthy jobs would be automated or completely abandoned. Work can, and in fact must, become enjoyable and safe. Since materials and energy and work, to the extent that it is not interesting and creative but only routine, are real, quote, costs, end quote, the aim will be to minimize them. Methods of production, too, will only change slowly. This will make decision-making about production much simpler. The alternative to monetary circulation in terms of exchange value is calculation in terms of use values. of the real advantages and real costs of particular real alternatives in particular real circumstances. The death of the commodity will be the beginning of a truly human society existing in harmony with the rest of nature. That's the end of this piece. Thank you so much for listening. I really have gotten a lot out of it, and I hope you did too.